Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Jamie Johnson. I am the Interim Director for the School of Law Enforcement and Justice Administration. And welcome to WIU Inside the System, sponsored by Western Illinois University. Today we have a special guest with us today. So we have Mr. David Harlow with us today, who was the former acting director of the U.S. Marshal Service. And so, Dave, I want to thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Jamie. Appreciate it.
And before we begin, just so that way the audience can get to know you a little bit, and we'll go through your bio a little bit.
Okay.
And I always tell people, if I mess up, you tell them, you correct me, and I will definitely do that. But you have to excuse my readers as I age.
Understand completely.
So for the audience, I want you to know everything that Dave has done and throughout his career, because he's had a tremendous career. So Mr. Harlow began his federal law enforcement career back in 1983 when he sworn in as a deputy U.S. Marshal Service in the Northern District of Ohio. He made numerous contributions in the Northern Ohio, including serving as commander of Operation Falcon in 2007, serving as deputy commander of Operation Falcon 3, developing Toledo's first cooperative fugitive apprehension team consisting of multiple law enforcement agencies and overseeing them in the development of the Northern Ohio Violent Fugitive Task Force. He rose through the ranks to Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal Service and transferred in 2007 to the Eastern District of Virginia, Alexander, and of course serving there as Chief Deputy of the U.S. Marshal Service to 2008. In 2008, he was selected for reassignment to the U.S. Marshal Headquarters to establish the Sex Offender Investigation Branch, overseeing the development and deployment of the Sex Offender Apprehension Program. He also oversaw the Interagency National Sex Offender Targeting Center and developed the U.S. Marshal Service Behavioral Analysis Unit to assist with prioritizing and targeting non-compliant fugitive sex offenders. In 2011, he was reassigned as Deputy Assistant Director for Investigation. In 2012, Mr. Harlow was promoted to SES as selected as Assistant Director for Investigations, overseeing the Fugitive Investigation Mission. Quickly rose through prominence, of course, and then associated to Director for Operation, where he served until 2014, managing the operation of the Directorate, including investigations, operations, and judicial security. Dave, you have a tremendous background. I have to say that right up front. And then, of course, witness security, tactical operations, prisoner operations, the justice prisoner, and the alien transportation system. In 2014, he was promoted to Deputy Director of the agency's second in command and senior career employee to ensure accountability and excellence within the agency. On July 26, 2015, he was appointed acting director by the Attorney General, where he served until his retirement into January of 2018. As such, he led the nation's oldest federal law enforcement agency, which occupies a unique essential position in the federal justice system. It is the enforcement arm of the federal courts and is involved in virtually every federal law enforcement initiative. He had the oversight of 3,800 deputy U.S. Marshals and over 1,400 administrative staff. Within that time, you won numerous awards, including the Attorney General's Award, Director's Award, and Special Service Act and Performance Awards. You're not done. There's more. All right. Upon that, of course, we have to also know that you established a Survivor Benefits Fund, and that was beginning in 2011. And of course, in 2012, you were promoted to the Senior Executive Service at SES. And of course, following retirement, you were re-elected to the director on that board and appointed as secretary back in 2018. And I know since then, you've had a numerous line of other appointments that we're going to talk about today. So it is an absolute honor to have you here.
Well, thank you. Sometimes it sounds like I can't hold a job, but most of those were move-ups.
Well, let me tell you, it's impressive. And so from my perspective, specifically, you know, I deal with students coming in as young as 18. And I have people changing their careers into their 20s and 30s. And I know having you here on the podcast, having you talk about your career, how you started, and I also say showing your humanity, okay? Because I know sometimes it's like, oh my goodness, that's the director, is scary. Okay, so, and you become that scary director person. We thank you for being here today, because I know the students are going to love it as well as everybody else around here. So,
Well, thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you
You're very
again.
kind, very kind.
Thank you again. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions. And so as I go through these, if you want to enlighten me on more of the question, you can do that and expand. Or I may say, if we're talking about something, I may have to ask a secondary question based on what you respond on. At any point in time, though, say like saying government secrets or anything like that, that I would ask, and you say, I can't answer that, you just say, pass. And I will leave that alone. Okay, so.
Fair enough.
All right, Dave. Okay, so quick questions. Please tell us about your degrees.
So I have a Bachelor of Applied Sciences in Law Enforcement Administration, which is what LEJA was called back in the ancient days. And I have a minor in political science. And that's it as far as degrees go. I always had the intention of continuing my education and getting a master's and so forth, but it just never came. I was moving up, I was taking on new responsibilities and never had the opportunity to go back to school.
Well, I have a question. Did you just come to Western thinking, man, I just want to be a law enforcement, or was there like a journey for you?
Oh, it was a journey. Again, recognizing how old I am, computers were in their infancy when I was in high school, and I had an introduction to a computer science course in high school, and I aced it, so I thought I'm going to be a computer programmer for sure. And I came to Western and with that in mind, and I spent my first semester, and I did pretty good. My grades were never great, but I did pretty good. And then I ran into two defunct languages now, I'm sure, Cobalt and Fortran, which, of course, those were also the days you did everything by punch card, and you had to go over to, I can't remember the name of the hall, but you had to go over to the hall and you had to reserve time on the key punch machine, and you had these programs for turning on a light switch for that thick, and I dropped several stacks of those walking across Q Lot going back to my dorm in the wintertime, and I decided, maybe computer science is not for me. And a couple of my roommates were law enforcement majors, or in what's a hall, room floor mates. And I took an intro to law enforcement course, and I took a second one, and I think the first one was taught by Stan Cunningham and Bob Johnson, and those are the two names I remember. And I just listened to these guys talk, and they were both retired officers, but I listened to them talk, and the passion that they talked about work, even after they had been gone for so long, it just really struck me. So I had no intention of law enforcement, most of my life. It wasn't until I came to Western that, after attending those two courses, that I thought this might be my job. So.
Oh, that is excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent. And I'm glad to hear you talk about your professor's experience. The one thing we pride ourselves in this program is practitioner-based, and bringing that into the classroom. So that's exciting to hear. Yeah. So, and having that history. Yeah. So that's huge. Okay, so now tell us, where are you from, originally, if that's allowed, tell us where you're from, and then how did you get into the U.S. Marshal Service? So
I was born in Virginia as a child, but as about 10 years old or so, we moved to the south suburbs of Chicago. So I grew up in Oak Forest, Illinois, and that's where I went to high school. And coming to Western was partly planned and partly an accident. It was partly planned in the sense that I ran track in college, and at that time, Western had an exceptional track program. In fact, even competing levels up bigger schools, because Jim Sackett was the coach, and there was a lot of superstars here. And I thought, I'm going to walk on, and I can try my best. And partly because my dad gave me a deadline to make a decision, and he surprised me one day and said, "You're supposed to tell me today where you're going," and I said, "Western." And so, there was a little bit of I don't want to call it a mistake, but a little bit it was just like a hurried decision. I want to go to Western. My sister came here. I had familiarity with it. And so I came here. Part of that journey of deciding where I wanted to go after I got into the law enforcement studies was speaking to my counselor here. And there was a little brochure on the wall that said Deputy U.S. Marshal. My mom worked for Customs, so I had kind of a knowledge of federal law enforcement in general, but to be honest with you, I had never heard of the oldest law enforcement agency around. I actually thought, that's a John Wayne and James Arness sort of thing. Those guys went away a long time ago. And so I read the pamphlet, read the brochure, still kind of a pipe dream for me because there was a paradigm shift in law enforcement back in the late 70s and early 80s where agencies were starting to recognize the value of education and degrees and college programs, and not that they didn't exist before, but I thought didn't have a snowball's chance to get into the Marshal Service until I'd been a police officer or deputy sheriff someplace. The Marshal Service was one of the first agencies to try to, our academy class was, 8 of us were young punk kids, 8 people were military veterans, and 8 were law enforcement veterans. And so they recognized mixing people together in class and taking the value from each group. So I applied for the Marshal Service shortly out of college, and my wife and I lived in Minnesota at the time. She had a job offer right out of school, and we lived up there about a year. I got assigned to Toledo, Ohio, and there you were. And there I was. So.
Wow. And you had a storied career. I love that. I love that. I really do. Now, here's going to be a hard question for you. I really do think it's going to be a hard question just because you've had so many roles. Can you describe like a couple of the roles that you had as a U.S. Marshal Service?
Yeah. So the Marshals are really, it's a unique organization because of the diversity of mission. And there's a lot of things that we're most probably famous for in most modern times people recognize us as fugitive hunters, which is something we've done since our inception, but it really blossomed since the late 90s into our nationwide fugitive task forces, and we have become the fugitive hunting agency in the United States, even to the point where other federal agencies refer their fugitives to the Marshal Service to hunt them down for them. So, I was lucky and blessed where I spent a significant amount of time in districts that had a lot of enforcement work, and that's what I enjoyed doing, and I loved that life. I went to headquarters and went into the investigative field, and that was, the blessing of a lifetime was the appointment as the sex offender chief. That was an opportunity to come to headquarters and make a difference. But we were formed with the idea of protecting the federal courts and with the idea of having an enforcement arm for the courts. When the Judiciary Act was signed in 1789, it was 2 days later they realized, hey, if we don't have some methodology to enforce what the judges say, then it's really falling on deaf ears. So the first 13 U.S. Marshals were appointed, one for each of the original colonies. And so our start was, administering to the courts, executing writs for the courts, which were arrest warrants back then, doing what the court ordered to do. And of course that's blossomed today where it's protecting hundreds and hundreds of federal judges and protecting the Supreme Court justices and appellate court justices and the whole judicial process, which includes witness security, protected witnesses coming into the program and coming in to testify, and jurors and prosecutors and anybody who gets threatened because of the court process. And so those are probably the two major functions of the Marshal Service that everybody knows about. The Witness Security Division is its own, in fact, division, and that was created in the 1970s when La Cosa Nostra was a formidable organization, and people had to be protected so they would come to court and testify and tell the truth, and that was the whole purpose. They wouldn't be afraid. And so, since that point in time, no witness has been harmed in our protection. I mean, there's been people that have been hurt who've left our protection, but nobody who stayed in the protection has been harmed. That program is a little bit different today because La Cosa Nostra is gone, but you have Russian gangs and terrorism and street gangs and those types of things. So it's still just as vital as it ever has been.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Now, for a young student looking, because they're watching. Shows are usually going to be wrong on TV, okay? But they're actually FBI, the CIA, okay, the U.S. Marshals. Besides the witness protection, right? I mean, hunting the fugitives, right? Is that going to be the major difference between the agencies?
Yeah, each one of the federal agencies has their own kind of primary mission, and for instance, we don't generally investigate crimes. We don't investigate who robbed the bank. The FBI does. We don't investigate who's dealing drugs. They do. When it comes to now we've got to find Joe Blow, let's turn it over to the Marshals, because that's what we do is we manhunt. And it's a different type of investigation. Now, we do have some sex offender statutes that we enforce. We have escape statutes, so if someone escapes from prison or escapes from jail, we investigate those from the ground up and enforce those. But for the most part, our job is to hunt people down. And it's and the other agencies do hunt people down. A lot of times they do it at time of indictment, and then if they don't catch them in the first roundup, then they pass the cases on to us when someone becomes in the wind, so to speak. They turn them over to us to go find them.
Okay. So that helps, because I know a lot of students are going, well, I hear a lot, I want to go federal. Yeah. Where? You hear that a lot, and it's like, so when we would bring in guests, and whether they be, we have had FBI on the show, we've had state police, and they're looking at going, oh, okay, well, I kind of like to do that, and so having you here is really a gem, because then they can go, okay, I want to learn more about this, and they can look on your site and we can talk more about it. Yeah. But it allows them to see the depth and the differences. Say, I want to be a part of that group versus another.
And the beauty is, one thing about a deputy U.S. Marshal, he's a jack of all trades. You're trained in every mission. You know how to do every mission, and depending on where you go, if you go to a small office, I started in a small 4-man office. We covered 21 counties, and you were doing something different almost every hour. You might be.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so you could be in a court case in the morning, you could be chasing a fugitive in the afternoon, you could be meeting a plane with a protected witness on it, that evening. And so, or you go to a larger office where you might be funneled into a unit. Mm-hmm. You go to New York City, you might be in warrants for 6 months, you might be in court protection for 6 months. So, but when you come into the agency and after you spend some time on board, you can specialize. And so you can just say, I want to be a fugitive hunter, and you can go over to that side of the house, or I want to work in witness security or court protection. So it does give you the ability to, when you get in and you decide, I kind of like this more than I like that, you may always be called over. We're the enforcement arm for the Department of Justice, and as a national emergency, we'll all become deputy marshals. No matter what your title is, you're a deputy marshal and you're going to go. And so you can go. Hurricane Katrina, we did law enforcement on the streets of New Orleans because the police department was incapacitated. So those types of things happen. But that is a beauty of our organization, I believe, and I'm biased obviously, but that you can specialize in what you like.
Well, especially when you talked about that, our emergency management majors, okay, because they deal with all the disasters. They really, because we had a couple people talk from the U.S. Marshals, and that was interesting with them too, and they're like, oh wow, I never thought about that. And they come with a very diversified background, and so it was a different take, and that's one thing that was really unique. So it's great because, as a student coming in here, it is overwhelming. I mean,
Sure.
I'm getting older. I'm not saying you. I'm getting older. So we're going, oh, okay, we know those, okay, but as a student, it is a lot to take in.
It absolutely is.
It is, Okay, so I know this question's going to be there, and this actually, because I had students kind of help me, because say, what would you like to ask? Okay, so here's one. Okay, so basically it was this. They simply want to know, what was it like when you were named acting director of the U.S. Marshal Service? Because I imagine it was like, yay and oh my.
There's a scene in Home Alone where Macaulay Culkin realizes, he goes like that.
Yeah.
I had one of those moments.
Okay.
And it was wow, and seriously, I had no designs on moving into upper management at all. I always felt like a lot of my promotions was, I'm going to put in for supervisor because I don't want to work for that guy, or I'm going to put in for because there's nobody.
I understand that.
I've moved up a lot of ranks, and I had no intention to come into headquarters.
Yeah.
And in fact, I don't think I stepped foot in headquarters until I've been in the agency like 25 years. So that shows you, the director's name was a signature on a letter or a memo. The associate director for operations, the chief inspector, they were all teletypes. Of course, I'm this old. We didn't have the internet back then, so you didn't even see a picture of these guys. Most of the time, there might be an annual magazine that came out once a year, the State of the Marshal Service, and you saw somebody. But so it was so foreign to me, and the opportunity to come across and be the sex offender chief obviously was a big national program, and it put me in the limelight where I was at the department, I was briefing the Attorney General, I was in the director's office almost every day, briefing on, because it was that important at the time. We got the money and the resources, and what are you guys doing? And so, but I still, even then, I walked into the director's office and I tightened up and I was real rigid, and it was yes sir and no sir, and And then one day you look around and you go, I kept having opportunities to move up. The chief investigation, or the assistant director for investigations, was my dream job probably. But I wasn't there very long, and the director said, I want you to head all operations. And so I was, 7, 8 months in that job, and I was like, okay, now I've got to do this. And deputy director was, okay, this is it, because it's a senior career person, and I have no political aspirations. But, and when the former director left, the Attorney General has the option, and generally they put a political in there. And so the fact that they let me stay and let me run the agency as the acting director was a shock. And then I was so proud that they did, because I thought for sure they would. Myself and Tom Brandon with ATF, he was another, we were in like similar situations. We were deputy directors, the directors left, and we both got allowed to stay and run. Hey, the agency's been running with them, so why not let them stay there? So it was never my wildest dreams. I mean, in fact, a lot of my friends, a lot of the guys I worked the street with, came in and said, I can't believe you're here.
And now it's like, sir.
Sorry. No, it's that was the other part of it is, Jamie, all my life, every time I've always been Dave. I had been, even as a task force commander, I was Dave to the guys. And so it was hard for me to have people call me sir or say director. I'm Dave. You're not Dave. And you had to remember to put that hat on at work. But I tried to never let it affect me in the way I interacted with people.
How was the schedule? Okay, and the reason, how was the schedule, because I know a student will ask, what's the schedule like when, say, you started, okay, to being director? Give me those two camps.
Well, when you're a deputy U.S. Marshal, you see your schedule generally. Obviously, we get call outs in the middle of the night. You have things that are going to happen and come up. But there are weeks when it's a 40-hour week. There's times when there's just not a lot going on. It's a 40-hour week. Your cases are moving. There's not a lot happening. And when you're director, of course, you got 2 coasts to take care of, and plus Guam and the Mariana Islands, and I can't even remember how many hours difference they are, but I know every time we had an issue, it seemed to me to be 3 o'clock in the morning. So the phone rings constantly, and I always joke that since before I retired, I made 100 decisions by 9 o'clock. Now I live with my wife and my mother, and I make no decisions. So
that's awesome,
it's just I'm not allowed to, but it's just a cut. And so, but you get used to the pace, and of course you have a lot of wonderful staff. And I was able to, the director, Stacy Hilton before me, picked a wonderful support staff for her, which I inherited, and then I brought in a very trusted friend from my academy days. And just wonderful to, hey, help me with this, let's go. I've got to make the decision, but help me with it. So, and your schedule will go till it's really, you go 150 miles an hour and then you retire and you go to 0. And it's hard at the end of your job, it really is.
Do you like retirement? So I'm asking that question.
Yeah, I do, and in today's world, a lot of times I'm glad I'm out. But you always, the one thing, and I'm sure every field has this, but I really do believe in law enforcement. People get into it for a reason, and they love what any first responders. I mean, it is a brotherhood. It is a camaraderie. You miss that. You miss being something. Every time in my whole life, I was a deputy U.S. Marshal or chief inspector, or I was something. And then all of a sudden, I don't mean this derogatorily, but you're nothing. You're just another retired guy in the group, and
sorry.
It's a harsh reality, but it hits you one day. You go, wow. 2 weeks ago, I was in a little mini motorcade going over to the department. Today, I'm taking the bus and I'm going in the guest entrance. There is a little bit of humility that comes with retirement. But the freedom to do what you want to do and to look back and realize I've worked all my life for this. I've worked for the ability to, got a nice pension. I had opportunities to go work after I retired, but I said, you know what, I can live just fine on this. I want to get away from having to do things and be places. So
I understand. I understand. I love it. Thank you so much. Okay, so as a student coming in, trying to get to U.S. Marshals like you were, right? What skill sets can they work on right now in college, whether that be physical, mental, emotional, whatever, okay, would make them stronger for the application pool, for selection? What advice would you give them for that?
Well, I tell you, there's quite a few things in your question too, but physical struck out to me. Yeah. You know, law enforcement is a vigorous job, and people need to realize that. And as long as, if you're going to be working and you're going to be protecting yourself and other people and your partner's self, get into the habits of staying physically fit. I don't mean you have to be in the gym every hour you're not in class, but just stay fit. You know, keep your muscles toned, keep your heart going. You know, have some aerobic ability, and make it a lifestyle now, because it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to start it back up when you're 40, and all of a sudden you're 15 pounds overweight, and the fitness coordinator with the agency is telling you, hey, you're moving up, and you've got 6 months to correct it. You know, those types of things. It's easier to make it part of your life, and you know, again, you don't have to be Iron Man. Just stay in shape and keep it that way. And then the other thing is your social skills are so important. I mean, law enforcement has changed dramatically in 40 years. When I started, you had a gun and you had a SAP, a leather-weighted SAP. That's what it was, you know. Nowadays, you've got 15 different, you've got pepper spray, you've got tasers, you've got batons, you have all these different steps in the force continuum. But chief among them, and the most important one, is your ability to talk to people and your ability to reason with people. And if one of the things that does kind of scare me about the younger generation is they spend a lot of their time looking in their phones.
Yes, they do.
Email, yes.
Sorry.
Emails, texts. I mean, we even changed, in the Marshal Service, we were changing in the end our interview techniques, because interviewing modern younger people is totally different than it was interviewing somebody 15 years ago. I mean, you know, the old tricks about sliding up close to them and looking them in the eye. These people sometimes, you know, they're just used to reading a screen. So keep those social skills, because you have to deal with people and you have to talk to them, and you can avoid so much trouble by using your verbal skills in your mind. And yes, we can all get tough when we need to get tough. We can all get in a fight when we have to get in a fight. But I always said that sometimes the people you're talking to, the only thing they have left is their pride. And if you take that away from them, you got to fight.
Oh yeah.
And so you know, let's try to keep that pride in them if you can. But and the other thing I would say is, it is so important in today's world. I'm discovering as an older person, it's harder for me to learn and retain things, because you have the capabilities of, I can look it up anytime I want to look it up.
Oh, I know.
So when I was a kid, I had to go to the library. I had to find the book in the Dewey Decimal System and card catalog. I had to look it up, and I walked all the way across Q-Lot. I'm learning this. You know, I'm gonna embed it to memory. Now I think sometimes when you take exams and take tests and things like that, it's just get me past the test. Let me take it. No, learn it. Really understand it. Learn it, because when you need it, when you're out there on the street and you have to make a split-second decision, you better not be reaching for your phone. So,
I agree with you 1,000%. I had made a joke today. I said this to a group. I was like, "Remember, the power can go out."
Yeah.
Do you know this information?
Yes.
Like, and I understand. And one thing I've noticed too is, and again, you know, whether it be extroversion or introversion, right? Okay, I've noticed we've gotten a lot more people on the introversion side. Yes. Okay. And, you know, and I've told them, I was like, everyone, we all work out different skill sets and get stronger. Right. But I know a lot of times, like if we're talking, right, with an introvert, they're in panic mode right now, okay, where it's like, you know, they're very smart, they're ready to go, but that skill set, so we've been practicing interviews again and again, trying to get them to open up, talk, different, you know, that type of stuff, right? Just trying to help them.
Absolutely.
But
and speaking of interviews, I mean, the beginning interviews in the agency, again, those skills are what they're looking for. You know, they're looking for people to look them in the eye. They're looking for people, a lot of the questions that are asked are open-ended, and there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer, but they want you to be able to articulate an answer, make a decision, articulate the answer, and then be able to explain your answer. And if a little pressure is put on you, not to panic and say, "Okay, I changed my mind," be able to explain why you came to that decision, because that is law enforcement, right? You're making a decision in 3/8 of a second that somebody's going to Monday morning quarterback for years to come in court, and so it's important to have those skills.
I understand. Thank you so much. That's excellent. The next question I got for you, right? How has your leadership changed? You've been in a lot of different leadership roles. How did it change over the years?
I think quite a few things, but I learned early on, it's so hard when you first go into your first supervisory job, because you're responsible. I've got my shiny new, we didn't have brass, but whether you got stripes or whether your badge turns gold or whatever, you want to make sure that everybody produces and that you look good. That's your job to your bosses. And so the intuition there is to micromanage. And I learned very, very early on that you let people run, even if it's not the way you would do things. If they're weighing off track, going someplace they shouldn't go is one thing, but there's different ways from getting to point A to point B. And you let them go and you let them do their job and you let them have ownership of how they did it. And you can ask questions, and if you want to, without making them defensive, you can say, "Did you think about this?" or "Did you think about that?" But I just found it was so important to let people actually go and let them do their jobs. And the second thing was, I figured this out early on, but I actually heard Colin Powell give a quote about it, and I'm going to mess up the quote, so I won't say it. But the essential part of it was make a decision. Indecision is not the key to flexibility, as some people think it is. If you have 70% of the information you need, then you use your guts, your guiles, your knowledge, your intuition, and you make a decision. There's so many things that are done poorly because the decision wasn't made at a proper time. And yes, you know what, every once in a while, something's going to come up in that last 30%.
Correct.
But that's when you can shift and move. But sometimes I find that managers are paralyzed by indecision. And the third part of this, sorry to ramble about this, but
it's great.
The third part of it is, if it's inevitable, then do it now. When you can see the outcome and the result. Let's go. Even if I always said, like delivering bad news to an employee or something. Maybe next week I don't feel like talking to that person now, or no, go do it now. Get it off your plate. Have those discussions.
We're in agreement there.
Yeah, let's because it does nothing for you, except for make you, vent on something, or maybe you'll get mad at somebody else because you've got this bad thing to go. But if it's inevitable, do it, and let's not waste time.
I got it. That's excellent. Thank you. What about any interesting stories? Did you have anything that when you was going through the U.S. Marshal training that you thought, man, goodness, I'm ready for this, and it was just so easy? Or did you find out going, something could have tripped you up a little bit? Tell us about that.
The training academy, so obviously it's been 40 years since I've been in the academy, and there's been one or two tweaks since that happened, but I was scared to death. I mean, I was a 22-year-old kid. One of the youngest in the class. There was one other guy younger than me. As I said before, 2/3 of the class they'd been through this before. They'd been through boot camp or they'd been through a police academy. And there was, a handful of us that hadn't been there before. And we had a very, they gleefully walked in the room and said, there's this many of you now, only this many of you is going to graduate because our data shows that this many flunk out. And there are just things that happen in the academy. Physical fitness was generally one of the things that caused people to fail. But there was also a big thing at the end, judgment. And it was back then not like the modern shoot don't shoot scenarios we have, the modern virtual machines. But back then, you could shoot and miss, you could not shoot, but if you shot when you shouldn't have, you could pack your bags and go home. That was, and so that really kind of put a shiver down your spine when you're going through some of those, those drills. So, but I was blessed, because I had the hardest part about training for a lot of people was the academic side of the house, and it was the legal stuff. Well, I had just graduated from WIU.
So you're like, okay, I got this now.
Stuff is all like I had it. And I actually kind of gleefully looked around the room after I finished my little module on legal, and I had it all done. I didn't have to study. It was easy. But the practical exercises, the things that you do there, all are real life scenarios. They hire role players down there. I mean, they are phenomenal at making it to the point where your heart is pumping and you're sweating profusely.
That's good.
And it is. And it's even better now. I mean, there's an entire city built down there. And if you and I took a walk down Main Street, you would think we were in a bustling, there's a Starbucks and a McDonald's and a hotel, and there's a slum area and there's a motorcycle. It's amazing what they have now. But, you go through a scenario and you think you're calm, cool, and collected, and you're barking commands, and you arrest the guy, and then you go in a room and you watch the video and you see yourself shaking and your voice cracking, and you all of a sudden realize I wasn't as cool as I thought I was. I wasn't necessarily Dirty Harry. So
I love it.
it's a great experience, and then of course you go back to the training academy multiple times during your career. There's after you've been on about 5 years, that's what they call an advanced school, and you go back down for a month, and it's really just regurgitating kind of a refresher course, getting you back on course. And then the other thing, in 2011, we lost 11 people. And that gave us an opportunity, and it was one of the blessings I had was being on this group, that we reviewed our policies and our training and our equipment and our rules, our regulations, everything, our structure. But we really put in a very intense training program. And so it wasn't that training was something you have to do. It's training something that you're going to do often. And especially high-risk warrant service. It's going to be something that you don't just do once a year or once every 5 years if you're lucky enough to go to school. It's something you do every 60 days. You're going through an intense course. You're shooting all the time. So training is really adjusted over the years, and where I think we've kind of said we're going to stop worrying about money so much, and we're just going to do what we have to do.
Okay, I understand that. Okay, now here's kind of like most guests don't like this question. All right, so but everyone loves it, by the way. Okay, so can you tell us your biggest failure, and what did you learn from that experience throughout your career?
Yeah, I had lots of failures. So I
have like 50 today alone. So
I made a few, personnel decisions I probably would like to have back. A few of those things happen. But I actually think most of all, I think it's really important for young people to recognize. When I started in law enforcement, they berated us at the academy that law enforcement's #1 in suicide, #1 in divorce. Don't come home and dump on your family. Don't come home and give them everything. And I bought that hook, line, and sinker. And I probably spent the majority of my young career bottling stuff up inside and not expressing it at home, and not that you should come home and dump, but there was a median location. You come home and say, Dad had a bad day today. Dad had a couple things happen that are really bad, so I'm going to need a half hour. I'm going to need. Let me read the paper, or maybe not tonight. Let's look at it tomorrow. I didn't have those conversations with my wife or with my sons, and when I got into the sex offender program, we started the behavioral analysis unit. Dr. Michael Burke, somebody that I was able to steal away from the Bureau of Prisons, who's probably the best expert in the country, in the world on sex offenders. But he also did a lot in the safeguarding program and how we look out for our own people and how we make sure that our people understand that you should use your family, you should, hit that medium stretch, And so I was an absentee dad, I would say, probably the first 20, while my boys were probably home, I was. And any advice I can give to anybody nowadays is don't do that. Don't wall yourself out. Make sure, don't come home and dump, but also make sure they know what's going on in your life. And they know that, hey, Dad's just not in a bad mood today. Dad's in a bad mood because he pulled a kid out of a burning car, or whatever happened during that day. And so I can apologize 1,000 times over to my kids and to my wife, but I'll never make that up. And especially my young people with kids, be in their lives. The job is going to be there, and I want you to be passionate about your job too. But there's avenues. Don't be mentally away. When you have to be at your job, you got to go, but don't mentally be away when you get home.
It's great advice. I think pretty much everyone we've had has a similar problem. Okay, does that make sense, right? And probably have struggled with that. And so I totally understand that. And that is tough. Now, you also had a behavioral analysis unit, right?
Yes.
That behavioral analysis unit, did that also go into like helping the agents?
Yeah, so the behavioral analysis unit was developed for the sex offender investigation branch and at our national targeting center. And the idea of the BAU was for us to look through the 125,000 sex offender warrants we had and have some methodology to prioritize them.
Okay.
These are the people. But this is where Doc Burke had this other expertise, and he came to me with this project and said, especially because you have investigators now going into sex offender work, which has its own world in the minds of our employees. So we need to make sure you're not necessarily dealing with violent crime, but you might be watching or looking at videos of a child being molested and the other impact that has. So Doc Burke was developing protection for our sex offender investigators, very similar to what the FBI's ICACs have. And we decided to expand it to our people. Like it's the stuff you experience on the street. It's the violence you experience it's seeing people shot. It's being shot at, those types of things. And so, we were running into some interference in the beginning because one of the things that we really wanted to do was to educate the spouses and send them home with a DVD, a training course on how to look for things in your loved one when they come home and they don't pet the dog or they won't hug the kids, what these things might mean. And these are signals and alarm. You're going to be the ones going to see it first. You're going to see it. All the guys I'm using the term guy.
I understand.
They put their armor on when they come to work, right? They're tough guys. They hold their sweat socks up with thumbtacks. They're mean, but they go home and their wives and their husbands and their significant others at homes are going to be the ones that are going to see this person has some problems. And we wanted to try to train them to, number one, recognize it, number two, where to get help.
That's such a blessing.
Yeah.
That's a blessing because it is definitely needed.
Yes, absolutely.
That's excellent. Okay, so because I have a lot of 18-year-olds, so if you could give your 18-year-old self, right? What advice would you give the young 18-year-old Dave now, if you can go back and talk to him?
This is going to sound so cliche.
I'm just going to mark that.
But I turned 65 this year. I turned 66 this year, but I turned 65 in the fall. And I just had this recognition about how fast life goes.
Yeah.
And how much of it is a blur. And how easy it is to take time for granted and relationships for granted and the things you're doing and not even being able to recognize where they went, where that time went. I mean, even my 34-year Marshal Service career sometimes seems like a blur. And, I have to think about things to remember them. And so it's just appreciate your time. When I was a kid, summer break was forever. Now summers go like this. And here we are. I live on a lake. We just took the boat out. Now we're getting ready to put the boat back in. It just seems like the years just really go by. So I would tell my 18-year-old self to slow down, look around, I hate this phrase, but smell the roses and enjoy the people you're around, enjoy your grandparents and your parents. That's the other thing I think that the modern world has brought us. We used to go sit and talk with our elders because that was our source for history and information. Now it's all available to us. And so I go talk to your grandparents because they're not going to be there one day. Go talk to your parents because they're not going to be there one day. So I think that's, has nothing to do with law enforcement, my time with Western.
No,
but there's another thing I tell an 18-year-old, not me because it's too late, but watch what you put on social media.
Thank you for saying that.
I cannot tell you how many people I have talked to and I, even as director, I told my staff, if a kid wants to come in and talk to me, I'll talk to him, because everything, I made some mistakes when I was here at Western. I did some things I'm probably not proud of. There wasn't cameras around back then. There was, and
I understand.
yeah, but today what you do is with you forever.
Yep.
What you do on social media, how you dress, a bad joke,
Yeah.
a joke told in poor taste, anything you do in a crowd, anything you post, anything you write, it's the type of thing that just has a lifetime, and it's always going to be there. And that's nothing, I didn't have to deal with that. You didn't have to deal with that necessarily.
No, I did not.
And
Pretty bad at social media, actually.
yeah, and I probably at my age put some stupid stuff out, but I don't care anymore. You have a right to say something.
Yeah,
but when you're a young kid starting your career, and I can't tell you how many people, I ask them that. I said, I have done. I said, you're going to have a hard time. You're in a world where you're in jobs are competitive. Some people will say, well, okay, that was 5 years ago and I was a dumb kid. Okay. But if you're sitting next to a guy that didn't do that 5 years ago when he was a dumb kid, they're going to pick that person. It's about risk aversion. And because someday you might be testifying in a case and that picture is going to show up. Defense counsel is going to lay it out on you and say, well, did you think that when you posted this? And so it's just so important to put everything you want to put out there. The sun shines and you smiling and pictures of you with your friends, but when it comes to something you might think is humorous or something that maybe you're politically active, and that's fine, you can be politically active, just be careful what you post.
I totally agree. That is such a hot topic with me, so, and I'm biting my tongue right now, so I was like, thank you. Okay, so last question I'm going to have for you today, okay? So, and then I know this one's pretty impactful for our students. Can you just tell us, and if you don't have three, it's totally fine, but do you have like three of the most influential people that helped make you? Because you're beyond your job, okay, does it make sense, right?
Yeah,
but
sure.
these people had an impact on either development of you, Dave, or just your career.
Yeah, I couldn't start the sentence without saying my dad and my mom, both obviously, but my dad taught me early on in life. You work hard, you put your nose to the grindstone, you show up early, you go home late. He just really believed in honesty and integrity. He believed in doing the right thing, even if you don't want to do it, but do the right thing. And I think he instilled that stuff in me early on. And when I came to the Marshal Service, that's how I did it. I came in early, I went home late, whatever the boss said, I did it, and I did it well. I didn't do anything half-assed. Yeah. The second person was probably Bob Bidwell, was my first training officer in my little four-man office in Toledo, Ohio. And he was 20-some years older than me, and he was what we used to affectionately call road deputy, retired on active duty. And he had been there, done that, and he was kind of seeing the end of the rainbow, career-wise. I mean, he wasn't out, kicking down doors or anything like that. He was doing what he had to do. But he taught me so much about humility. He taught me so much about what we kind of talked about before, about not taking away somebody's pride, about talking to people with respect, about, even though you're all geared up in your gorilla suits and you've got all this tactical stuff all over top of you, you can still say yes, ma'am, and no, sir. You can still talk to people and you don't have to bark orders, those types of things. And Bob just passed away last summer, and he was just somebody I look back and he was more like an older brother with me when I was learning. And I think part of the reason why I was successful was because I opened myself up to that side and to what he was saying, and I did things his way. And probably the third person is T. Michael Earp. Mike Earp, he's not only a dear friend, but he was the assistant director in charge of investigations who looked outside his realm, outside the investigative operations division, to pick me and bring me over as the sex offender chief, along with a couple of other field guys. And so there's a headquarters versus field sort of mentality. And all the headquarters guys, are like, oh, there's them and there's us. And Mike was a really transformative leader in the Marshal Service. And he recognized the benefit of bringing in guys who are out on the field working and bringing them in and utilizing their skills. And he was just a humble, hard guy, but yet the nicest guy you ever met in your life, and a forgiving guy, and you didn't want to disappoint him. And he assembled probably the best team. If I called somebody the father of the Marshal Service Fugitive Program, I'd say it's Mike. Mike was at the helm when the regional fugitive task forces were invented, when we started special deputizing, and put together the system that we have. A system that last year arrested 75,000 people, violent felons. Mike Earp's name's on it, and besides Mike being a wonderful guy, he's also the guy that works you hard all week and then has everybody over his house for a barbecue that weekend. And so he's one of my dearest friends, and but he probably is somebody that I say impacted me personally and gave the last 10 years of my career, the opportunities, that world I said I never would have seen before. Mike gave me that opportunity. The other thing that's neat about Mike is he's a real live descendant of Virgil Earp. So you think about the
wow, okay.
He becomes the head manhunter in the U.S. Marshal Service. He's a real life descendant of the Earp family. It's really kind of a neat story. And
that is really cool.
Yeah. So he's great. He's written a book. He's a great guy, and I've missed him a lot. About when he retired, I took his job as associate director, and I missed having him around when he wasn't in the building anymore for me to run to.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I would be remiss if I say my wife wasn't a very impactful, the best one, because she's going to watch this, I'm sure. But we've been married 43 years, and my career was always first. And she delayed her education. She delayed, all those things that happened. Like she took care of the kids, she took care of the home. She had a great career in the last few years. But I certainly wasn't the best husband in the world, the best husband I could have been. But I wouldn't have done anything I did without her support at home, and her love and attention. So I can't say enough about her.
Well, you've been really blessed. You've had some great mentors, and that's huge.
Been lucky.
Yeah.
Even a blind squirrel finds an acorn, as they say.
I love it. Well, Dave, I just want to thank you for coming here today, and being a part of this podcast. And so it has been a tremendous honor, sir. So again,
me too. Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks
so
for having
much.
me.
So, all right, so that concludes our episode with former director David Harlow. It has been an amazing interview. And again, please continue to watch the podcast as it continues to go throughout this entire semester. Everyone, have a great and lovely day. Take care.